All right, welcome to another episode of the Political Playbook. I'm Wyatt, this is my co-host Darren, and obviously Congress is in recess, so there's not much to talk about. So we figured we'd do the audience a favor and let you guys know where we stand politically, at least on our really our three biggest issues apiece. So basically, this is just a way for us to be transparent with you. That way, whenever we're supporting a particular candidate or not supporting a particular candidate, you kind of just know where we're coming from. So with that being said, we're going to kick it off with Darren's first list. And like I said, it's not that we don't care about everything else about the list that you're seeing on your screen right now. It's just that our top three are going to be like our biggest indicators of who we're going to support. So, Darren, if you want to kick it off, what is Darren's most important political issue?
I'd say my most important political issue is getting immigration under control, both legal and illegal. Uh, yeah, I mean, to me, controlling the demographic shift of the country probably just comes first, among other things. And to me, it doesn't matter if somebody's status is legal or illegal, because ultimately, uh, I kind of see things as like a competition for scarce resources. So if we have people who I don't identify as Americans coming in, taking jobs, taking houses, buying things, raising the cost of living, they don't share our culture. I just think that's bad in general. And yeah, it's one of the worst things happening to the country right now, I think. So that's definitely my number one.
Yeah, just to stick on that for a second. In turn, like it's definitely like a bigger issue now than it used to be for sure, right? I would say pre-Trump, this issue was not even in the top five, right? So, do you think that you're like part of that wave, or do you think that this is something that you naturally would have cared about very deeply, just as like a consequence of like what's happening now?
Uh, Honestly, that's a good question. I don't know what my beliefs would be were it not for the Trump revolution in 2016, which has continued on till now. Uh, because he's really the one that like made it an issue like on the national level and like really drove it home. Maybe if Trump never came around, I'd be a libertarian or something. I don't know. I don't know what I'd be
Right.
without him. Maybe I'd be just a liberal. Who knows?
Right. And then maybe just go ahead and explain like why this takes the number one spot for you. Without obviously discussing your next two, we'll leave that as a surprise for later. But just why is this so important to you?
I have other priorities, but ultimately, this ranks highest because I think maintaining the demographic core of the country of paramount importance. I think it'll what America is will cease to be America if we keep flooding our nation with like H-1B Indians, Latin Americans. Uh, yeah, I mean, ultimately, because if you ask what is America, well, it's kind of like hot dogs at a ballpark. It's not like curry at a cricket match. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean that.
absolutely. And
I mean
and
that's
you
just the most important thing. Maintaining the demographic core.
I gotcha. And so now that we've kind of got the philosophy behind it, I just want to ask you in terms of policy, so that way we can understand it a little better, what does that look like? So, in other words, if you got your ideal candidate on the issue of immigration, what types of policies or legislation would they support in your eyes that would be ideal?
Oh, easy. They would just have to advocate for a complete immigration moratorium, legal or illegal. So it doesn't matter if they do it right or wrong. no more immigration. Uh, and then, obviously mass deportations.
Gotcha.
But
So,
yeah,
uh,
that those two things working together, and like strong border security, making sure, but that kind of is implied.
right. And just to clarify on your immigration moratorium, would that be a moratorium on future immigration? So, in other words, no legal immigration coming in, and obviously no illegal immigration coming in, right?
Oh
That's what
yeah,
you mean?
at least for a couple decades, I think. At
I
least for a
gotcha.
couple decades.
And then you want to partner that with deportations, right? So that way
Hmm.
we can get rid of the current existing population of immigrants. And who would you target there, ideally?
Anyone we could find, it doesn't matter uh
The legal
yeah.
status. So it does okay. That's really what I was getting after. Is I wasn't sure if you meant for the deportations, we're gonna go after just illegals or both legal and illegal, or
Oh, I see what you mean. No, no. I think to an extent, maybe we go after people who have expired visas, but I don't think I would start denaturalizing legal citizens, like, or anything like that.
no, 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 no.
I think,
I understood that part, but I was asking for like so like the moratorium is on both, obviously legal and illegal immigrations, right? And that's how you're going to deal with the future population of immigrants. But the current population, the deportations part, are you going to like take away like student visas? Are you going to take away work visas and deport them? Or are you going to let the legal people stay here and then that are not yet citizens, right? Or you go and what are you going to do with the illegals here, obviously?
I guess for the in between crowd, like student visas and people who are in the process of becoming a citizen, I think they would have just drawn the short stick. I would get rid of them as well. But student visas, they can be here on a student visa, but if they are caught acting up, I would revoke their visas. The Trump administration has done this for silly things like criticizing Israel, but I support the criticism of Israel, so I wouldn't go after student visa holders on account of that. But if a student visa holder was stomping on an American flag and was like saying "death to America," then yeah, I would deport them easily, without question.
I gotcha. And that would be up to ICE, or would that be up to like the State Department, or and I'm not trying to like get nitpicky. I'm just trying to ask like will the individual like low-level agent be making these decisions in your mind, or would like it would be like a top-down like directive, we're going to target certain types of behavior?
I think the more decentralized you make it, the more efficient, honestly, because if everybody's waiting on commands from up on high, whenever there's an ambiguous case, they might be hesitant to go forward with it. I think, giving as much power to the individual agents as possible is probably best for efficiency's sake. Yeah.
I gotcha. And one of my final list of questions for you here is obviously with immigration, is there a way that you can balance really like the border security and then like obviously the deportations with like, humanitarian obligations, right? So like for example, like asylum seekers or people like that, people that've been in the country for years. Are you saying that that's just, tough stuff, or like how do you balance that line, or how would you ideally want a candidate to balance that?
Ideally for a candidate, I would want them to take an approach of, tough luck, pal. Like, you might have some sob story, but it's not really our problem. But I would be. It's not like I'm totally against asylum seekers.
Hmm.
If it's justified, then I think, yeah, by all means, give them temporary asylum status. I well, I mean, it's not really a good example because we're causing it basically, but the genocide of the Palestinians, I would open my doors to a number of Palestinians, even though they'd probably cause a lot of problems. Just being honest, those people have a pretty bad track history of when they've been let into other countries, just causing havoc. Just look what happened to Egypt and Jordan. In the 20th century when the Palestinians were let in, it caused all kinds of trouble for those countries. So but even with that in mind, I think there is enough of a humanitarian in me that yeah, I would let some Palestinians in.
Interesting. Okay, I know I said last question, but this one, I just wrote this one down because I think that this is really good. On the topic of deportations, why is your preference deportations over something like, cultural assimilation or you know, why is deportation the priority over that? Like what's your thinking there?
I think it goes into like having a critical mass of people. Like I feel like people are less likely to assimilate the more there are of them. But if they're like enveloped with American culture at all sides, rather than being in their own ethnic enclave, like the Somalians in Minnesota. There's
Right,
like enclaves.
Chinatown, Little Havana, right?
Yeah,
I see what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah.
You're worried
It's like,
that okay, sorry, go ahead.
well, basically, it's like I just don't know if places like that should really exist within our borders. So if you get like a critical mass of them, they're going to have their own ethnic enclave, and then it's going to be, the people who are there beforehand are the natives are going to be pushed out. So yeah, I think that for that reason, deportation I think is the better system rather than trying to assimilate.
I gotcha. And then this will be the last question for every single topic. And then we'll move on. Or I'll give you the last words, obviously. But which party currently uh more captures your ideal value here? And then any final thoughts you have after that, go ahead. And you can say
Yeah,
both or neither. By the way, you can say Republican, Democrat, both or neither. So go ahead.
Republicans by a small margin are better on this issue. Republicans are good on border security. But ultimately, I mean, in terms of like deportations or curbing like legal migration, they're pretty much on par with the Democrats. And I'm sure some viewers will say, "What? Their deportation numbers are similar to Democratic administrations." It's like, yep, go look at the numbers. I mean, Trump makes a big show of things, and he's performatively cruel about things to gin up the base. But this is all done to just uh, basically deflect from how low the numbers actually are. So, beyond border security, the Trump administration isn't even all that great on this issue. So, Republicans win this, but only by a small margin.
Awesome. Well, couldn't be more happy with how that first segment turned out. Now, unless you have any final other words, what would be your second uh highest value topic?
Okay, my second topic I care about the most is the pernicious influence of foreign states. and curbing that. So, as listeners know, I'm very Israel critical, and I'm Russia critical as well. I think the whole Israel thing is especially pernicious. I mean, I just saw an announcement today that Trump was thinking about withholding disaster relief aid from states that boycott Israel. So I don't know if you saw that. It was like breaking news just a few hours ago. And
I
I think he's since recanted, but
well,
because it caused such a stir.
here's the funny part, and it's I'm glad you mentioned that. So he did rescind it via Truth or whatever, and he but the Department of Homeland Security, which is obviously where FEMA is under, they sent out like a clarification statement that says we do also reserve the right, though, if this becomes necessary, to deny funding. So basically, they took it out. They're literally clarifying that, like, we took it out in writing, but we might still do this. So it's very interesting. But please continue.
Yeah, it's just so naked that so many of our politicians are beholden to the interests of this one country. Basically, it's just so it almost I would almost put it over immigration because it's something that's just so in your face. Both parties really are to blame for this. Uh, again, neither party is good on it. Um, and yet, it's one of these things that you really just can't even. Well, for a while there, you really couldn't talk about it without suffering social consequences. The doors have opened, though, so I feel, and totally safe speaking about it at this day and time on YouTube and such. But yeah, it's kind of humiliating and like really frustrating. It produces like a very visceral like anger reaction within me whenever I see stories like this, of like Trump doing something like this or bombing Iran or allowing this genocide to unfold. All of these things are just infuriating to the nth degree. And it's constant, it's nonstop, and every day you have to think, oh yeah, our country is owned by a foreign element. There's a fifth column within society, and they exercise undue influence. So yeah, I guess you could call this like a foreign influence. Foreign influence is probably but the thing is, it's not exactly foreign influence because there's so many people here, natural born citizens that are totally in favor of this stuff and they have a lot of lobbying power. So,
Right, right. So in terms of policy, you've clearly shared your broad, like foundational criticisms of foreign influence in America, whether it be Russia through, podcasters, for example, or whether it be Israel through well, the United States Congress or the presidency, right?
Israel through like every facet of American existence, every elite institution.
Well,
Yeah.
you said it. What do we look like in terms of policy for you on there? So like for example, does that mean barring I mean I don't want to put words in your mouth, but does that mean like barring foreign aid to these locations? Does it go further than that and argue for sanctions like we do on Russia? Or like go ahead and tell me like what's your thought process in terms of like policy we'd like to see. And you can go as specific with countries as you want, or you can go as broad as you want.
Yeah, you've got to go further. In terms of Russia, I'll just get Russia out of the way because really quick. I don't know what you do to curb Russian influence, honestly, without impeding on free speech rights. Because honestly, Russia they make like they kind of operate within the digital sphere, and they promote Russian stuff through people like I assume Candace Owens and but also I mean people they obviously use are like Tim Pool. We all remember that fiasco that happened earlier this year with the Tenet Media. So in terms of Russia, I don't know how you solve it. We've already sanctioned them to high hell. Uh, yeah, I think honestly, I think there should just be initiatives, uh, maybe from the government, maybe from everyday people to just be wary of anyone like promoting Russia in any way. Because as an American, there's really no reason to be sympathetic to Russia. So, just be wary of it. I don't know what more policy wise we can do. But in terms of Israel, what we can do to punish them, uh, we could ban dual citizens from holding elected office. We could make entities such as APAC be forced to register under FARA. We
And
could,
that's a big one, and that one is lesser known. If you could just go ahead and explain like what FARA is, what it's designed for, and why APAC should fall into that according to you, I think that would be really helpful for the audience that doesn't know, if you don't mind.
yeah, so the term FARA, it's an acronym, FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Basically, it's to like be transparent about who, like if a lobbyist is like a foreign government, it has to register under this to say, hey, I'm the Qatar, I'm a, this is funded by the Qatari government, and we're being transparent about it, and we're giving this candidate money, and you should assume then that this candidate will probably go to bat for the Qatari government.
Right, and
But
it's
APAC,
not it does not make it illegal, correct? It's just a transparency issue. It just says, "Hey,
it's a
we
disclosure. It's just a
exactly."
disclosure.
Yep,
So
thank you.
I mean, they could still obviously give money, and that is problematic. But I'm also acting like kind of in a practicality kind of way. Ultimately, I would prefer that foreign agents, not be able to lobby or give money or do anything like that. I don't know if that's something we could reasonably achieve. Uh, but I guess I already threw out like barring dual citizens from holding elected office, so that would be a hard thing to enact as well. But yeah, if we could bar, you know, for, foreign agents to from giving money, that would be a big thing. That would do wonders, I think. What else we could do in terms of Israel specifically? This, I would like to punish them in terms of like applying sanctions, cutting off the aid unless they stop the war. Uh, yeah, I'd like for the dog to wag the tail rather than the tail wag the dog for once in that relationship. I would go as far even if Israel remained non-compliant. I would go as far as saying, hey, maybe we just let Iran do what they will with you, and we won't defend you at all. And I think that would be fair. So that's kind of how I would handle it.
I gotcha. And would you try to do this or not? Would you, sorry, not would you? Would your ideal candidate or your party platform, would you prefer that it was a united front, say with Europe or NATO or wherever? Or I'm trying to figure out, is this like you know, is it a together if possible, alone if necessary type of attitude that you have on these foreign enemies, or are you open to the idea of like, no, we need to do this with our allies?
Uh, yeah, I mean, together if possible, alone if necessary. I think that, yeah, I mean, but honestly, I feel as though our allies are more staunchly against both of these countries, that I'm Russia and Israel, that is, than we are. So it would be easy to get our allies on board. I mean, France and Britain are planning on recognizing a Palestinian state here soon. Canada is as well. I mean, who's closer to us than Canada? France and Britain. Not way too many countries. So yeah, I think we could easily bring our allies along the ride for this.
I gotcha, and I don't really disagree with that. Now one of the major rivals of the United States that was left out was China. In your examples, I was just curious if you have any China specific policy, or if you have any goal in mind, or if you'd like to, maybe bring them closer into the fold. I'm just curious, like, what your stance is on China in terms of foreign dealings.
I certainly see China as a threat. Uh, right now, they're not the most immediate threat in my mind. I find Israel and Russia being like, I find them doing like actively doing things that harm us. So I to me they're on the top of my mind right now. China is something we're eventually going to have to worry about a lot more, especially as they build up their naval fleet. It already rivals ours. It's just massive. They don't have as many aircraft carriers or anything, but they do have a large quantity of vessels, and their shipbuilding capability is far greater than ours. So that's also worrisome. Their manufacturing ability. The one thing we do have is if we, and this is, it's kind of, I have a complicated view of it, because in some ways, if we went really hard and became really pro war and somehow knocked off Vladimir Putin and knocked off the Ayatollah, that would be really good in terms of containing China because, if we take out Iran, we take out China's gas supply, especially if we take out Russia. I mean, Russian gas. So we could definitely limit their fuel supply if we took out those guys. It would be easier to contain them for sure if we did that. I don't know. I don't know if it's worth going to war for. But I could see that being a viable strategy. Uh,
I gotcha.
yeah,
And then, unless there's anything else you'd like to say, which party currently uh more encapsulates your I guess foreign influence view?
the Democrats are 100% better on this. Well, I shouldn't say 100%. They're 100% better on this regarding Russia, Russian influence. The Democrats have kind of an immune system built up for it. But on Israel, they're nearly just as bad as Republicans, and in some ways, they might even be worse. I only say that because I think of figures like AOC, who who has recently shown herself to be kind of a subversive on this issue. I could see many well-meaning leftists in the future voting for President AOC, thinking she would be anti-Israel or something, when that just simply is not the case, as evidenced by her recent votes. Marjorie Taylor Greene uh, brought some resolution or whatever to deny Israel defensive funding, or I should say, limit their supply of. I think it's like THAAD systems, the stuff that shoots rockets out of skies.
Right, defensive missile protection.
Yeah, and AOC voted against that. So it's like obviously AOC doesn't see what's happening as a genocide or anything, or if she does, she's not ideologically committed to like stopping genocide or like reducing the pernicious influence of Israel on our society. So, someone like AOC, I see as a really uh, particular danger, because I could see her like tricking enough people into voting for her and then like basically end up repeating the same cycle again and again, kind of like Obama,
Hmm.
because Obama gave this issue a lot of lip service when he was running in 2008. So, uh, I definitely see AOC as a subversive on this issue. Bernie Sanders as well, and I like Bernie Sanders for his stance on other things, but on this issue, he's totally compromised. So
I gotcha.
only the only people that honestly the left has is like Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. There's a couple others. I think Summer Lee. I think Summer Lee is good on this. Al Green. So that's four of them. They have a few more, I think, and then on the Republican side, you really only have that libertarian Thomas Massey. You
Right.
have MTG, but she's kind of stupid, and I don't trust her. So I don't know. Give it or take it. She might be good on this issue. When it really comes down to it, I don't know if she would be good on the issue. I think she's kind of being a little calculated and is just trying to get clout right now. So I think that's the deal with Marjorie. But we have one guy on the Republican side who is not a subversive, uh, for sure, and that's Thomas Massey. So I basically the Democrats are better on this issue because of Russia, but when it comes to Israel, they're just as bad, if not worse. So.
I gotcha. All right. Well, let's move on to your third and final issue. This is your third most important issue. So let's what you got?
So free speech is my third most important issue. And this is another thing I kind of have a complicated view of. Ultimately, if I had all power in this country and I could rule as a dictator, I would probably limit people's right to free speech. I would probably say, you can't advocate for anti-white policies, for example. Yeah, I would just make that flat out illegal, and I think it would be effective because if you can jail someone or takes away someone's bank accounts or take away a lot of their luxuries in life on account of their speech, you can basically eliminate the speech you don't like or that is contrary to your goals. So, in that regard, if I had power, I wouldn't think this way. But since I'm out of power, I do think free speech is of paramount importance because otherwise my ideas can't get uh, traction. And if you can. and also I mean it can be taken way too far. Like the situation in the UK, it is just insane. What I mean, you can go to jail for sharing memes, and that's the case in a lot of European countries, like in the Netherlands. In fact, there's a, a politician in the Netherlands, Dries van Langenhoven. He got sentenced to jail time just for being in a group chat where some edgy memes were shared. So it's just beyond crazy. In Europe, it's really a two-tiered system of justice too, because the natives are forced to endure these insane speech laws, and then like migrants get off the hook for basically anything. So it's just crazy. But so yeah, I wouldn't go crazy with it in my ideal world, but if I was dictator, I would limit people's free speech.
I gotcha. So you're conflicted because you want somebody to limit the free speech of people you disagree with, but up until that point, you're almost a free speech absolutist, right?
Oh yeah, until I get power, I need free speech absolutism so that my ideas can take hold.
I get you. Wow, what a stunning admission. Um,
Yeah.
okay, well, how do you balance free speech and stuff like misinformation, right? So I could list any number of examples and bore the audience, but you understand what I'm saying, right? The idea of like, you know, you can say whatever you want, not even if you know it's not true, right? And send it out there to millions of people. How do you compromise that with, you know, people should be able to say whatever they want versus like they shouldn't be
Uh,
able to lie.
I think people should have the right to lie, but I don't think if it crosses into defamation or especially in this new AI environment, if you're defaming someone in a particularly heinous way, like creating AI porn of them, I mean, I think that you almost have to be able to sentence people to jail terms for that. I think, especially if it's like not a celebrity, you know. I think maybe I would allow some grace if somebody, created AI porn of like Jennifer Lawrence or something. I don't think the I don't think you should be given I think you could be fined for that, maybe a hefty fine. But if you created like AI porn of like your colleague or like your classmate, I think, I think some jail time would probably be appropriate, especially if it was convincing. It would have to be judged case by case. But yeah, anything defamatory, I think, needs to be litigated if it can be proven to have caused harm. Yeah, and that's basically the law of the land right now, I think. And I think the laws developing around AI are kind of in motion in that regard. So nothing too out of the ordinary there. I think you should be able to lie. I think you should be able to say, oh, the sky is green, or oh, the Sandy Hook massacre didn't happen. Something even as wild as that. I think it's totally ridiculous that Alex Jones, for example, was fined like $1 billion for claiming Sandy Hook didn't happen. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, he probably got fined more than the BP oil spill or something. So, it's just crazy. Uh, yeah, I don't think there should be really any penalty for that, even if it's a pretty egregious thing to say. I think that's within. It's not like it caused direct harm. It caused indirect harm, but it didn't cause direct harm. So,
I gotcha.
uh,
How would you handle private sector content regulation. For example, uh, X, formerly known as Twitter, right? Elon
Mm.
Musk owns that. It is a private company. He can do with it whatever he wants. He can amplify certain tweets. He can shadow ban certain people. Would there be a what would you do if Elon Musk were, banning people or amplifying reach for certain people? Like, what is your regulation that you would back for private entities as a whole?
Yeah, I've always I take more of the tack. I would prefer social medias be considered more like utilities, like the telephone. I mean, when you're on the phone or texting with someone, you can basically say whatever you want, and you're gonna be able to keep paying for that service. And you could be saying all kinds of outlandish things, and you can still pay for the phone service, and you're not going to be banned from it. So I think social media should be the same exact way. It's ultimately just a more advanced form of communication. So I get that there's like a free association argument that these companies will make, but
Or their
and there's like,
advertisers will likely make that argument as well. But go ahead, sorry.
yeah, that is a problem, but I think X attempted to solve this, and it's kind of solved. I mean, you can pay for X premium, as long as you're not banned from buying the product, like as long as nobody is just totally banned from buying the product, then I think moving pay moving to like a pay for the service kind of model would probably be the way to fix this. Because then you won't even have to worry about advertisers because everybody's paying like 5, $10 a month for the social media service.
I gotcha. I'm trying to think of.
Oh, and
Oh, go
also,
ahead.
I should have said earlier about the whole lies thing. I think Community Notes on X does a fantastic job. And in fact, I find it pretty useful most of the time. Like, there's like a solid, like, 2 to 5% of the time where I'm like, okay, this community note is just ridiculous. But typically, when that happens, it gets voted out. So, most of the time, I find that community notes are pretty helpful, and they do dispel lies pretty well uh, from both sides. So, of the political aisle. So, I like the community note feature. I mean, it probably ultimately relies upon the user base being fair, which you might not get in some of these other social media sites that are like, they lean one way much harder than the other. But yeah, I think the community notes feature on X is workable,
Yeah, yeah.
sufficient.
I okay. I completely agree. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or talk about, or you ready to answer which political party is closer on this issue?
Um, it's funny because I see, and I promise I'm trying not to just do these cop outs, but maybe the Republicans are a little better, but it's hard to say, especially with this current administration, because Trump is pretty bad on free speech in terms of like, you know, deporting like these students that wrote an op-ed in a newspaper. Some girl with the last name Ozturk uh, was
Mm-hmm.
detained because of something she said. Mahmoud Khalil, he's probably the most famous example, detained, missed the birth of his child because of some protests he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then also there's like some Project Esther stuff that hasn't, to my knowledge, been enacted yet, but that I think the Republicans are sympathetic to. That is worrisome. Uh, I know when the Democrats were in like the peak of the zenith of their power, like during the woke era, they certainly clamped down, but and it was totally unfair to right wingers, but there was nothing quite as heinous as like the whole Mahmoud Khalil thing. So I would say they're both pretty bad. I would say until this administration, I would have said Republicans are much better, but with Trump, I don't know. I think it's hard to quantify who's worse. I would probably have to say Republicans are worse at this point on this issue, and Democrats are just marginally better. But it's pretty bad either way you cut it.
Yeah, no, I get you. Well, you have any final wrapping thoughts about your top three issues overall, or you know, you have anything you want to say, honestly, before we move on?
Uh I think that's about it for my issues. Let's go to yours. What would you mind if I start my inquiry into you?
Absolutely, go ahead, man.
All
I'm your
right.
witness.
What's your first one? And I guess it doesn't have to be in any particular order, but you have three, and uh so give it lay out your first one and what's its ranking in your top three.
So I'll go ahead and I'll go in order. That'll be fine with me. So the first one is and this is my most important one when I'm looking for a candidate is what how do they view economics broadly speaking? And what I say or when I say economics, I really mean, what is their view on taxation, wealth inequality, redistribution, and trade policy. So, when you look at taxation, like it or not, it is a form of redistribution. So, in other words, we're taking money from virtually everybody and we're distributing it to do things like build roads, build our military, take care of our old people, stuff like that. Um, it, there's this current level of neoliberalism going on where it's basically we're living in an area of trickle down economics. And Ronald Reagan did not invent trickle down economics, but he was the first one that made it last for as long as he did because before in previous generations they realized why it failed so quickly is because it actually never all that ever happens is the wealth inequality for the rich goes up and the wealth inequality for the needy goes down, and then for a large part the middle class is shoved downward. And so the goal here is that we want to create an opportunity economy and we want to build an economy that builds the middle class as the strongest portion of this country. And we want to do that through taxation, redistribution, and trade. And I can get into specifics if you want, or if you have a question to clarify, I can go ahead and answer any of those too.
Well, okay, let's get into relative specifics, I guess. So I imagine you would want a new tax bracketing system. So for the top 1%, let's say, well, let's just say this. For those making a million or more a year, what would their uh, tax burden be annually?
Yeah, I would love, well, not annually, right? When we talk about taxation, and I understand what you do, and I know you know how tax brackets work, but we're talking about marginal tax rates, right? And we're talking about every dollar above $1 million, right? So that 1 million
Yeah.
in first dollar, that dollar should be taxed at roughly 60%. And once you get above like 10 million, and listen, I'm not real fixed on the numbers. We could find out maybe it's 10 million, maybe it's 20 million, maybe it's whatever. But at some point, I feel like you got to tax it at like 90% above a certain amount.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is fair. We certainly there was a period in time in which we did tax at 90%, and the world didn't stop turning. So I
Right.
think,
It is,
yeah,
as a matter of fact, for the most prosperous time in American history, the 1950s to the 1970s. It's called the Great Compression. If you look at it, it basically made it to where lawyers, judges, doctors, professors, they had virtually the same amount of wealth as plumbers, electricians, linemen, whatever you could imagine, right? And the reason for that is because so much of this taxation was given to the government and then redistributed, so that way everyone's about the same. And what that does is it allows for a very, very healthy middle class where everybody prospers. And it's a phenomenal concept. We got away with it, you know? We got away from it.
Well, it's those darn takers that are not. I jest. Okay, well, let's go on to trade policy then. What would that look like? I imagine you would advocate for protectionism. So, what are we looking at? Like tariffs? Who would be tariffed in the under the Wyatt regime? What goods in particular? Or would you not do tariffs?
Well,
What would be your trade policy?
so I would never advocate ever for blanket tariffs other than like for non-economic reasons. Just for example, um, if we were to buy, say, Russian oil, I know we largely don't, but let's just say as an example, we did. It would make no sense to sanction them economically. But because of the war in Ukraine, I understand, okay, well, this is not an economic decision. This is like we're trying to end the war. You understand what I'm saying? But in terms
Oh
of
yeah.
specifically like trade and economics here, I would do highly targeted tariffs. So, for example, software, tech, chip production, anything that we want to build domestically here to increase our capabilities of output, that's what I would tariff. And you could, it depends on what for the rates. For example, semiconductor chips, I think we should tariff much of South Korea, Taiwan, China, all of those countries. But I don't think tariffs go enough. See, this is where a lot of people get lost on the protectionism, is that I think it would actually do much better to do a top down, almost like subsidy of these, because basically, essentially, what we're doing, Darren, is we're laying the foundation for a future of jobs, right? So, in other words, I want, as an example, like semiconductor chips. They're going to be the most important things to power the future, whether it's supercomputers, whether it's AI, whether it's just, chips that go in your phone, right? Or your car, or medical technology. You know, we're not going to just be able to let the private industry do enough. We need a top down subsidy of these until they become profitable because the fact of the matter is, these are really expensive industries to start up and they're not very profitable for a long time. And the only way that a private entity is going to take that on is if the government is willing to take some of that cost. For example, SpaceX, we do this with a million other companies. I don't see why we can't do it at a significantly higher level.
Well, okay, yeah, I agree with you on that. I don't think tariffs are sufficient to cause a. I don't think they're quite enough to cause a manufacturing boom. I think they certainly help. You know, especially when you tariff goods that make sense rather than tariffing like coffee beans, like the current administration is doing, which we can't even grow here. So yeah, I
Right.
agree with you on that. Let's go back. In fact, I pretty much completely agree with you in the sense that yeah, there's gonna kind of like in the Build Back Better and the Chips Act, there was there those were things to it boosted industry through subsidies. So I think that was good. Kudos to the Biden administration. Definitely, yeah, but let's go. I did want to ask, and I kind of jumped the gun. But let's go back to the whole redistribution topic.
Hmm.
What would that look like? I mean, do you have any reservations in terms of redistribution? What are we talking about? Like a UBI type system, or are we
No,
talking
no, no,
about
no, 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 no.
redistribution?
So broadly speaking, here's what I mean when I mean redistribution. So I do not mean like how you know, Marxist,
Andrew
Leninist.
Yang. Oh,
Right. No, I was going because when they say redistribution, they mean like redistribution of wealth. In other words, like you literally take like the cash from the billionaire's wallet and put it into the low man's wallet. That's not really what I'm trying to do here. The focus of this policy, or I'm not trying to even do some sort of UBI like you're saying. Um, Really, when I mean redistribution, I mean that we're going to start taking. So listen, America is the most like complex, profitable economy in the history of the planet. Our GDP is something of what is it, 30 trillion, 30 something trillion a year. We're going to take, and when you look at what we've accomplished domestically, it's almost like, well, what the fuck? Where's the wealth at, right? So my goal would be to take some of that profit and carve it back and redistribute it through, better infrastructure, cleaner environment. You could nitpick the issues if you want, but what I'm saying is that we should have the wealth as a nation, as a treasury department. We should have the wealth to do basically whatever. It shouldn't be because of a lack of funds that we can't do anything. That's what I mean when I say redistribution.
okay, okay. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think just putting like cash payments into people's pockets would be an unwise way to do it. I just kind of remember back in the COVID days when everybody was getting stimulus. I remember people spending it on a lot of nonsense, myself included. So yeah, investing in infrastructure industry. Yeah, making jobs. I think that's certainly the wise way to go about it.
Hmm.
But unless there were any other points you particularly wanted to hit on in the economics umbrella, which party is better in your estimation? And I'm sure I know which one you're going to pick because I would pick it too. But when you tell me though, are there any reservations you have with this party? Do they not live up to your dreams in some ways
Yeah,
or the other?
so it is going to be the Democratic Party. And yeah, I understand what you mean that they haven't gone as far enough. They're honestly like, and if you look at public opinions polls, they seem to have this weird misconception that Republican economies are just juggernauts. They're just, oh my God. They know how to build. If the Republicans know how to do two things, it's apparently deportations and run economies according to the polls. It's just, the public has that perception, but that perception is not quite reality. I mean, I'm sure as you know, Bill Clinton is famous for saying this. Since 1980, there have been 50 million jobs added in the United States. Republicans are responsible for 1 million of that. Democrats are responsible for 49 million of that. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
we can criticize the math and maybe fire whoever came up with that statistic, but it wouldn't do us a lot of good. Now, in terms of like which framework would I agree with on the Democratic Party? I mean, you're going to laugh at this, but I thought Joe Biden did pretty okay about trying to do this. I wish he would have done more on specifically the taxation, to be honest with you, but everything else, I thought he did great. I thought his whole focus was on economics was spot on.
No, I agree. He especially regarding uh like things like the Chips Act and Build Back Better infrastructure, and then like boosting industry. I think Biden was very good on those two particular points. But we
Absolutely.
we basically covered economics now, which was your uh first point. What's your second most important topic
Yeah, so
that you
my
hold dear?
my second most important, it's gonna kind of be tied in, but I just wanted to make it like a distinct difference. So we'll go a lot quicker through this one. It's gonna be labor rights and worker protections and whatnot. Um, I think that the American worker has basically gotten the short end of the stick in every deal done in this neoliberal era, and that's across, Democratic administrations and Republican administrations. I mean, just as an example, when Ronald Reagan came in and started the whole, de-unionize campaign, the Democrats laid down. They didn't do a fucking thing, not a fucking thing. They just let this happen and let the problem snowball to the point where now it's damn near impossible. And I just think that, workers' rights and the collective bargaining, those types of things are essential for a strong economy and for a prosperous middle class. Which again, that's kind of like my core here is like we need a strong middle 30 or 60% of the country. So, probe away, comrade, if you want me to get into more specifics or,
Oh
um,
yeah, uh, so you're obviously in favor of unionization. You would probably then like Oklahoma, we're like what do you call that? A right to work state,
right, where
or
yeah, so for the audience who doesn't know, so right to work basically says that, like, okay, you work at a job that has a union. In most states, you're actually required to get that job to become a member of the union. But right to work is a carve out for that. So, in other words, in Oklahoma, for example, we're a right to work state. Let's say you're a teacher and there's a teachers union. You do not have to be a member of the teachers union. And just to be frank with you, Darren, I would end right to work legislation. I think it undermines and subverts the entire progress of unions while still allowing the people who decline to join the union to benefit off of the backs that the unions have built. And I think that that's wrong. And I think that it makes us the worker weaker, and it hurts everybody, including the person who opts out.
okay, so well that's good. That's like a concrete thing that you would change if you were in charge. What about uh, what about like minimum wage? I'm assuming you would probably increase that substantially, but what's your number? What do you think the national minimum wage should be? I think that basically goes into workers' rights.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, no, no, I agree. That was one of the things I wanted to bring up in terms of policy. I would put it at $20 an hour. I mean, the fight for 15 started 10 years ago. Think about that. Think about how crazy that is. So a dollar. This is just for everyone who is 16 and listening to this podcast. A dollar in the year 2000 is now, because of all the inflation and all the money printing and the deficit spending, whatever you want to say, is now worth 60 something cents now due to inflation. And the minimum wage has basically stayed the same since 2009. So think for 25 years, the dollar has reduced by essentially a third. The minimum wage hasn't changed in, what is it, 17 years now? I can't remember off the top of my head, but you get the idea. I mean, the idea that, and I understand that there would be some complications with this, but ultimately, I do believe that it would be a net good, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean the 20 number. I don't. I mean to be nitpicky, I suppose. 20 seems a tad high, especially for low cost of living states such as ours. I certainly could see that being totally workable in like California and New York, probably even parts of Florida,
Well,
and maybe like.
here's what I would do to comp because I actually have thought a lot about this and I've gotten a lot of pushback from that number. Um, so what if and I'm not trying to concede here. I'm just saying that like this is something that I've literally worked out as I've been working through this. If we were to start at 15 and then we just go up 2% every year, essentially, um, I don't see a huge problem with that. Like I'm not ideologically opposed to it, but my fact is that the minimum wage needs to at least double at least.
Well, that I do agree with you on. I think when the 15 was first thrown out, I used to think that was a little crazy, and that it was kind of it first became really popular in like the 2020 election. It's like 2019, 2020. And I even remember our economics professor, Dr. Scott, being like, I don't know where they're coming up with this number. That seems crazy. And at the time, it certainly did seem that way. But after the inflation of COVID and where we are now, I feel like 15 is completely appropriate and would be totally workable even in low cost of living states such as Oklahoma. And then, yeah, raising it by 2% a year, that it'd probably be a little less or a little more than inflation. It would probably be roughly equivalent to inflation, give or take. So I think that's totally fine. 15 and then 2% increase. Yeah, we're certainly due for a raise. I agree with you there. But yeah, I like that. 15 and then 2% every year from then on. That seems wise in my opinion. Uh, I guess I don't know. What are your thoughts on like things like OSHA? Would you expand? Uh, I don't know. Would you, in terms of worker protections, would you mandate more safety protocols, or do you think it's good where it's at?
We actually in the United States, we actually do a pretty good job in terms of like occupational safety. That's as a dude who's worked warehouse jobs, who's done I wouldn't dare say what I've done counts as like real hardcore blue collar. But as a dude who's worked at a factory, I can tell you that like safety is taken very seriously in most places, at least that I've been. I'm not saying that that's everywhere. And I know the consequences for failing to follow safety regulations. So I think we do a pretty good job about that. I wouldn't like do a massive crackdown. The only regulation I think that I could have, and I think that the United States actually got this very correct. So most of the crackdown, Darren, is making the company more liable for occupational safety. So for example, if you cut off your finger because you weren't trained, that's not your fault. That's the company's fault, and that's who we're going to go after, right? So that forces the company, right? Because now they're liable. They're gonna train you how to not cut off your finger, what to wear, so that way even if you do mess up, your whole hand's not gonna get cut up, or maybe you don't lose the finger. It helps shift the burden on the people that have the best ability to make it more safe. I mean, that's just the way it is. Because left to your own devices, the worker may do unsafe things to boost his own productivity. The company has to come in and say, no, can't do that. Safety is the number one most important thing. Um, at least that's just my opinion about the best way to go about this.
Well, okay, that's all fair. If you didn't have any other particular points on the labor rights, worker protection topic, which party do you think does better in this regard?
I would have to say by a very narrow majority, I would give it to the Democrats. And in some instances, I could even see you giving it to some Republicans. Like if, for example, if you're in a particular Senate race in, I don't know, Ohio or Michigan or Pennsylvania, and you've got like a pro-union Republican, I could see how he could be better. But I don't want to say they're equal in terms of platforms, because the Democratic Party platform is very anti-right to work. The Republican Party is exclusively right to work, and that's like really the core of this whole thing. So I would say by a very narrow margin, I would, it's the Democrats, unfortunately.
Oh no, I honestly I would have given it to the Democrats by probably a pretty wide margin. So, uh, yeah,
Well,
I agree. I think.
Republicans do a pretty good job of like lip service. I don't know if they actually believe it, but assuming that they do, I mean, I like I said, I would view them very almost like I'm sure how you do with Israel on the politicians. Like, yeah, Democrats might be better, but I mean, come on, they're pretty similar. That's how I feel, at least.
Oh, okay, okay. So maybe if I familiarized myself more with the topic, I'd have more of uh that both sides anger. But what's your third most important topic to you?
Well, try not to cringe out and freak out on me because it seems like so Bill Maher, so 2000. But I would actually say like climate change or the environment in general. That would be my third issue easily.
Oh, okay, okay. No, I mean that's fair. It's certainly one of the biggest, if not the biggest, if you really think about it, issues of our time. You know, I know at least in our state, not this summer so much, but last summer was one of the hottest on record, and this summer has been one of the wettest on record, believe it or not. So, kind of a flip floppy thing. I yeah. Well, what would be some of your first policies you enact to kind of remedy this? I'm sure you'd go right back into the Paris Climate Accords. What else would you do?
Yeah, you stole it. That was the first one off of my notes. I would try to expand the Paris Climate Accords, like that would, because here's the fact of the matter, ladies and gentlemen. When you're talking about global climate, it cannot be solved through. You could almost tie this into foreign policy because this cannot be solved alone. At the end of the day, we're going to need China on board. We're going to need India on board. We're going to need Japan on board in order to help mitigate these disasters. Because here's the fact at the end of the day. When and I understand this is controversial to say in today's time, but when CO2 is concentrated in the atmosphere at the highest rate, and it's something like millions of years. Greenhouse gas effect rises the temperature of the Earth. We're going to continue to see a rise, and what that's going to do is that's going to throw off the balance of everything: climate, rain, natural disasters, growing patterns, natural vegetation. All of this is getting thrown in the kinks in unbelievably unpredictable ways at a rapid pace that the world has never seen before. And I'm not even sure to what extent we can solve all of that, but for sure we can mitigate this. And like you said, I would mitigate this at a global level, despite how unrealistic that might even possibly be. I could grant that it might be unrealistic, but I'd still like to see an effort. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Sir, I think it certainly has to be solved on the global stage, but domestically though, what policy do you think? Maybe like an EV mandate in like 10 years, like every car must be. I mean, that might be a little ambitious, but maybe some future date, all cars must be hybrids and or EVs.
Yeah, no, I
Would
I
you?
love that idea. I love the idea of you have to get to net zero carbon. I love that idea. Now that could only be done domestically. There is no scenario where you're going to tell, like, for example, like Argentina or Uruguay that they have to be net zero carbon emissions. But domestically in the United States, we can absolutely do that. If we don't do that, it's because of a lack of will, not because of a lack of ability, in my opinion. So we should do everything we can. Whether that's, like you said, an EV mandate would be awesome because we're going to need help from the private market. And speaking of help from the private market, I'd love to see nuclear, I'd love to see solar, and I'd love to see wind. Because here's the thing, like, okay, so nuclear, we're about as maxed out as we can. They're just currently not very popular because of, Fukushima and Chernobyl and like nuclear meltdowns. Nobody wants to live next to one or in the area of one. But for the most part, they're safe and their research is like very well tapped out. But for solar, wind, hydroelectric, we're at the forefront of that technology. We have no idea how much electricity they can yield, how much, and listen, we should let the private industry do that. I'm talking, subsidies. We should help them out with the infrastructure. That's what the government should do, like hands on, in my opinion. Subsidies to them to let them do the R&D, and then we take care of the infrastructure, like transmission lines. Storing the energy is actually going to be a huge portion of this. And I'm sorry I'm rambling, but there's just so much that goes into fighting this that people aren't really aware that like this is going to take the private sector and the public sector almost working together in order to get this done.
Okay, yeah, and I'll ask one more question on this point that I'm almost sure you'll agree with, and then I have one that maybe might get a little more philosophical. But
Sure, absolutely.
so for the one that's more of a throwaway, though, you would probably advocate for like a carbon tax. I know back for a long time that was actually thrown out there as an idea that we might use carbon taxes to get industry to move off like coal stuff.
Yeah,
It's
listen,
certainly been in the ether.
I mean, I'm not ideologically opposed to them. I am just worried about the efficacy of them. It's sort of like I know this is like changing a little bit and going backwards, but in my economics thing, you never heard me mention a wealth tax, and the reason for that is because I don't find them particularly effective. And I kind of feel the same way about the carbon tax, but I would support it. I just would need evidence that like it would be fruitful. You know what I mean? And I just we don't have a lot of data that it will be. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, I could certainly see that. I mean, I'm sure certain industries are still so reliant on quote unquote dirty energy that maybe legislation like that would really drive prices up for consumers on the other end,
Right. And and,
in the
and
short term at
I
least.
I've and this is just my opinion, and I'm sorry. I know this was supposed to be your throwaway and fast, but I just almost view them more punitive in nature, and that's really not what I'm trying to do. I'm actually just trying to incentivize the other profit motive, because I mean, like it or not, capitalism is incredibly good at experimenting and figuring out new ways to adapt to rules. So for example, if we if we give them the money to help start up and then they just take care of the rest and they just figure out a way to make money off of it, capitalism is great for that. Capitalism is awesome at doing that. I don't know that capitalism is good at, okay, if you keep doing this, we're just going to take more of your money. I don't know that they're, because that's not going to incentivize change. They're just going to pass that cost on to the consumer, is my worry.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I'm glad you were able to riff on that. Actually, yeah, that is something that yeah, that is a good point. But to my other question, what would you do in terms of climate change denialism? This kind of goes back to the free speech topic, but would you go as far to punish it, or would you allow there to be kooks that are like, going out there and basically saying it doesn't exist and it doesn't matter?
Well, I would never argue, this is just like me personally. I would never argue for the government to like, for capital punishment or locking up for wrongthink, right? On any issue, by the way. That no issue is immune to that, for in my opinion. And my my strategy to combat what I would call like reality denialism, right? At this point, for those of you that don't know, like the climate change science is in, it just is, and the way to combat that is, and I don't mean this, it's a propaganda campaign. They need a better one. And I don't mean propaganda in like a negative way. I just mean it in like we need like a massive coordinated information campaign explaining the dangers and the consequences, and then the solutions is the important thing.
Okay, okay. So I like how you are consistent. You don't seek to punish. You seek to incentivize and educate. So
Right. And there
uh
is, I am not hopeful that we are going to change the minds of, you know, I don't know what the current denial rates are of climate change, but I'm sure they're still astronomically high for my liking. We may never be able to convince those people That's just a fact of the matter. And the information age, ironically, has made it harder for these people to change their minds. And I'm totally fine with doing this without their. I'm totally fine with continuing with my plan without their consent. Like we we will we if they want, yeah, fine. We will do this with or without them. I would love to do it with them, but we will do this alone if necessary.
Very good, very good. I agree. What? And I'm sure I know the answer, but what what party in your estimation does better on this issue?
It's not even close. I'm sure as you know.
Yeah.
The Democrats at the very least believe in it. You know what I mean? They may
Oh yeah.
not
Oh
they
yeah.
may not want to do anything about it for whatever, maybe it's their donors, maybe it's they don't know how to deal with the potential fallout or whatever. Um, but they at least believe in it and acknowledge that like if we don't do anything, we're fucked. But I would encourage the Democratic Party to look at it in a similar way. And listen, I'm a Joe Biden supporter. I loved him up until the point where I was like, okay, the dude's too old. We got to get rid of him. But he had a very interesting outlook on this. He was like, I don't, because Joe Biden did not actually care about climate change, right? I don't even know that he really believed in it, but he said, well, if I'm going to support this, here's his framework was this looks like jobs, this looks like energy production, this looks like independence, like this, you know, all of these different things went off in his head that didn't go off in anyone else's head, right? So like the idea that like he saw climate change and he saw, okay, we're going to need a lot of jobs to build the infrastructure. We're going to need a lot of private sector jobs in these manufacturing plants. Not manufacturing. Sorry, I'm stuck on different thing. Uh, it's late for us, folks. But you understand what I'm saying. Like, we're gonna need jobs to solve this issue, and that's the sell. You know what I mean? Um,
Oh
so,
yeah.
so I wish that we could do a better job of that in the Democratic Party. And I hope the audience does not get from this that I'm the huge like Democrat like shill. I am not a very partisan person. I just generally I have to ride with them because they're at least sane. But that's just me.
Well, I think it's. I mean, it's totally fair. I mean, if those are your three big issues, and I certainly agree that I think they certainly come out on top on all three of those. So it's pretty much undeniable, especially on the last one. I mean, you really can't even argue that. So